Contaminated drinking water kills countless children every day. You can help stop death. Visit lifetoday.org/water for life to give clean drinking water today.
I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Life Today Live. I am Jordan Murphy, and I'm really pumped for today because I've been talking with our author, Tabitha Panariso, already, and I feel like I have known her for years. She is awesome. You're going to absolutely love her with her new book, Loyal in His Love, an invitation to be held by Jesus while others let you go. I am so excited to welcome her. Tabitha, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here too.
Well, let us know, where did this all start? I mean, you're a licensed counselor. You have a lot of trauma background. Where did this calling kind of come on your life?
Yeah. The calling to write the book or the calling to be the therapist? I guess they're probably one and the same.
Yes, we will do both, girl. Tell us all. Bring us in.
You know, it was really through mining my own heart and walking through my own life and story that I felt called to help other people in whatever way I could. In many ways, I just didn't receive the help that I might have wanted, or I did want, I think, as a child, as a kid, going through the different things I experienced. And so that is really what endured me to be in other people's lives, to be that presence for them, to fill that spot that I didn't receive as a child. And so I did that as a counselor, as a school counselor first, actually. I was a school counselor for several years, worked with kids ranging from kindergarten to 8th grade, and then moved into private practice after that. And then as an author, just also really wanting to say the things that I just see other people unwilling to say, wanting to occupy the places that other people are afraid to sit in.
Yeah. What are some of those things that you're like, man, nobody is saying this, but everybody's thinking it?
Yeah, rejection for sure, which is, what my book is about, but also things like loneliness. That's a really big one. Just the longings of our heart, the insecurities I think many of us carry around, a feeling like maybe we don't belong, or maybe we're not as valuable as we think we should be. In marriage, even just this sometimes discontentment and fear of am I doing it right? Are we going to make it through when all these other marriages seem like they're perfect and shiny and brand new? So really just those deep secrets I think we sometimes carry, and we're just not sure if we can say them out loud to other people.
Absolutely. It is terrifying sometimes to even have the thought pop up in your brain. And I'm realizing that a lot of things that we carry in adulthood are really a result of things from our childhood. Do you agree with that? What was childhood like growing up for you?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. For me, my mom was in the military, and so I had the gift of moving about almost every 3 years, I think, since being a little kid. Grew up actually in Germany at first and came from Germany to the States and lived in, I think, 7 different places, Texas being one of them, actually. Lived in San Antonio for a little bit. And so I think just in that kind of context, it can be really hard for a kid to figure out who they are, where they belong. And I found myself really just wanting to belong. And so that just looked like kind of doing whatever it took to fit in and to make friends. And so I think it took me a really long time to figure out who I actually was. My dad, my biological father, he left when I was around 5 years old. He was an alcoholic. My mom divorced him when I was pretty young. And so just even having to reconcile this missing part of my life, that actually also made a really significant impact on how I navigated relationships and friendships and attachment with other people. And so there was a lot, I think, that I experienced as a kid that really not until I was maybe in my late 20s that I was like, oh, this actually formed me. It kind of really molded me. And I need to take a look at these things because I don't know that I always want to live my life the way that I've been living it.
Yeah. I so echo that because so my parents divorced when I was young as well, and it was from abuse and things like that. And it's really tough. And you think like, oh, I've handled it. And that's just like part of who you are, right? Growing up
Yes.
as a child. And then when you hit adulthood, it's like a whole nother puberty that I just totally was not expecting. And with the new things like, weddings or kids, marriage, whatever, it's like those little like unseen wounds kind of rear their ugly head because it's like, where are these feelings coming from? Where is this anxious attachment or these fear of abandonment things? Like, where is this coming from? And it's almost like it's taking us back to the past that we thought we'd like outgrown and thought we'd left behind. And
Yeah.
so like I relate and I hear you and I see you, and that's why I'm so grateful that you are like so fearlessly sharing your story. How did the Lord, like, how was his loyalty just brought to you in his love while you're, navigating these things as a child and as an adult? They're really
Yeah.
scary. And a lot of times we're just looking for that anchor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think as a kid, I just, like you said, we kind of just are making our way through. We're really not paying attention to the hurt
Yeah.
that's inside of us. And so my mom, I actually grew up in the church. I knew the Lord from a young age, but I don't know that I actually anchored myself onto him. I think he was always present. And looking back, that is a gift and a joy to say, oh, the reason I made it through wasn't actually because of what I was doing or how I was striving. It was because God was carrying me the entire time. And thank God that that was happening. But I really felt like it wasn't until, I gave my life to him when I was 18. But you know how your relationship with God, it just has layers, right? So it's like you're just learning new things about him almost every day. Sometimes it feels like,
Yeah.
right? So in my 18 to 20 range, I felt like I knew God as this, sovereign, incredible, like just powerful, almighty, right? But it wasn't until I think probably the last 10, 15 years of my life where it was like, oh, there's a relationship here that I get to have with him. And that's when that loyalty really crept in. That's when I really began to see the faithfulness because when I needed to be the most raw self that I needed to be, just lamenting and grieving and really weeping over the loss of relationships or even of rejection, God was just in there in it with me. He just didn't leave me. And that really changed things for me because it changed the way I saw myself. Like, if God isn't going to leave me when I'm this messy, this broken, that means I really am loved and I really am accepted and I am really his child, a beloved daughter of his. And that transforms you, I think, from the inside out.
Absolutely. Going from, oh, I know about him to knowing him. And I think
Yes.
what's so interesting is a lot of times we project our relationship with our earthly parents onto our Heavenly Father. Is that something that you kind of had to wrestle with as you transitioned from religion to relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I it would have been really difficult for me to admit this maybe 10, 15 years ago, but through a lot of different events, I did realize that because of my own relationship with my dad and him just not being there, being willing to abandon his daughter, that really did impact the way I saw God and just thinking, well, I guess he's just going to leave me at any moment in time, just waiting for the foot to drop,
Yeah.
just waiting for him to be upset and just say, well, you're not good enough. Or really, like, I saw that in my performance and striving, like wanting to be perfect, right? Like
Yes,
wanting
yes.
to check the boxes off the
Yeah.
list of like, if I could only measure up, then I will be enough for him to accept me and
Yeah.
love me as his
Yeah.
daughter.
Well, and even with that, even if for some reason he does leave, I know in my heart that I've done absolutely everything that I can do and I achieve the most, and I can be like almost a little proud of myself and have a little bit of pride and not just feel like, oh, there's like that sense of control, right? That we so desperately want to have in our relationships. And I think it's beautiful how the Lord has just shown you his heart for you and how that can change even your heart for yourself. And now you have kids of your own. And so how has that, your relationship with the Lord, like just poured into your relationship with your own kids?
Yeah. It really is sweet to learn how to just love my kids where they're at, and really just to have this tenderness towards them, to see the potential that's inside of them, to see the purity that's in them. And if I can reflect on that for them, if I can see that in them, then I know that that is how the Lord is and what he is seeing in me, right? And so
Yeah.
it just is this cool, um, really like positive cycle, right? Of
Yeah.
like the more that I'm operating in this place with my children, the more God's love becomes apparent to me, that I get to be a conduit of that for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's such like a redemption, I feel like,
Yeah.
of your story and you being able to just give so much unconditional love to your
Mhm.
kids. And I'm sure you just pour that out and are just an amazing mom. You talked a little bit, I want to back up a little bit about rejection.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when people leave our lives, we become bitter and there's a depression that happens, but we don't realize that that's really from a root of rejection. What
Mhm.
even is rejection? How does that kind of play out in people's lives? Because a lot of people, they don't look at things and name. They're not able to
Mhm.
name it.
Yeah, yeah. I think rejection looks like a lot of different ways. Like, I think a lot of us immediately, it's kind of like the word trauma, right? Like,
Yeah.
we throw these really big, heady words around, and it's easy to distance ourselves from them and say, oh, I haven't really experienced that. So it's the same with rejection. I think, people might be thinking, well, I haven't had someone abandon me. Like, my parents have been around, right? Like, that's certainly one version of it. Rejection could also look like um, a divorce between two people.
Yeah.
It could just be simply someone not choosing you, someone not inviting you to a party. We see it in our careers when maybe we're fired from a job that we love, or maybe we're not accepted into the job that we've always dreamed of having. Rejection can even be like an ideal that we have and really needing to change our version of what we hope life could have been. Like, it's really just loss of something that was incredibly significant in our life, something that really mattered to us, something specifically, I think, a lot of relationship, right? Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
where it's anchored in.
Yeah, it's like people talk about a grief journey all the time, right?
Mhm.
The 5 stages of grief, but it doesn't always look the same for everybody. Somebody might go straight towards anger, somebody might go towards, you know, not believing it, whatever that is. But there's so many layers to it, right? But
Yeah,
where do we even begin? Because we don't want to just stay there. Like, we know that the
yeah.
Lord, that's not the Lord's goodness and that's not his heart for us, right? We want to grieve healthily and not just push it down, because that's not healthy either. There's such a
Mhm.
balance, right? Like,
Yes.
but where do we even start? Like, where do we go? Because it can be
Yeah.
so overwhelming to even think about.
Yeah, the basic really, and you said it really well, is just naming it. I
Mm,
think a lot of us are afraid to name what still hurts inside of us. But when we take the time to name it, just the simple acknowledgement can act as an invitation to soothing those wounds, right? Being able then to take and tend to them. And so I really encourage people to just call it what it is.
yeah.
And after the naming part, be willing to recognize how it's maybe changed the relationships that you're in, how you might operate from place of self-protection, right? Or sometimes it's the performance piece. How has rejection affected you? And so our eyes just become open. And when we see the truth sets us free. And it's the
Mm.
same when it comes to naming those things that hurt us.
Yeah. When you talk about rejection kind of building us and maybe making boundaries or walls within our relationships as adults, when
Yeah.
you became married or friendships as an adult, how were you able to build healthy, trustworthy relationships with all that you had been through?
Yeah, I don't know that I did.
Real. I love that, girl. I love that.
Um,
Oh,
I
yeah.
I think that's a work in process for sure. I would not come on here and lie and say I have, you know, these perfect, secure relationships. They are certainly better than
Hmm.
what they were before. It really is just this humbling process, and it really is this constant um, willingness to look at myself and say, oh, like I am withholding this person from loving me. I'm not being willing to invite them into my heart because I'm afraid that they're not going to love me. They might reject me, right? Um, I'm afraid to invest because what if it doesn't work out? What if I get hurt again? And so I
Yeah.
still, to this day, have these thoughts, but I now understand where they come from. And because I understand them, I can more easily take them captive and say, okay, what is this thought trying to tell me? Okay, it's saying, hey, you're feeling some insecurity here. You're feeling, scared. Okay, how do I then tend to that emotion?
Mm.
So then I say, okay, what do I need right now to feel confident to move forward and show up as my authentic self in this relationship, right? And that might look like prayer. It might look like getting encouragement from someone I trust, right? Like it might just be saying out loud what's happening inside of me so that it no longer has power over me, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's a work in process. It gets easier over time, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the intentionality behind it that really matters.
Yes. And
Relationships require intention.
yes, and there's like this level of self-discipline, right? Of you're saying it gets
Yeah,
easier over time because instead of just turning to allowing those thoughts to spiral and allowing us to act in a certain way,
yeah,
we have to say, you know what? No, I'm actually gonna rewire my brain. And oh man, it's so scary because it's so vulnerable. But what's so
mhm,
interesting as I'm hearing you speak, and I'm nodding along this whole time. You guys don't see me, but I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Because in order for us to not feel rejection sometimes, we tend to reject others. And so then
yes,
it's like this ugly little cycle that we didn't even intend for. And then we're like,
absolutely.
why are my relationships not going great? And it's like, baby, you need to look in the mirror, girl. And even though
Yeah,
that's not our intention, that's what ends up coming out. But what I
yeah,
loved is that you touched on, you know, taking our thoughts captive. And the Bible talks about this, right? And so I heard somebody recently say, like, it's not really your responsibility that certain thoughts come up, right? But it's
mhm,
your responsibility of how you handle them. You talk
yeah,
about taking your thoughts captive. How in the world do we do that whenever things just feel, because sometimes it's easy, right? But
yeah,
sometimes it feels like boom, 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 especially whenever you're getting them from multiple relationships. You're like, what is happening? And sometimes it just feels like the
yeah.
waves are rising. Like with your trauma background and experience, like being licensed, how can we sometimes kind of calm the storm in our brains to even be able to have the self discipline to use the tools that we have learned over time?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first step in that is being able to just take a minute. I think this is a great exercise for people to be able to do is we know what the narrative is. Or let me put it this way. We know what the story is that we're telling about ourselves or that what we believe to be true, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe that's um I am not worthy of a relationship or um I am not loved. Like these kind of statements that have really anchored or rooted themselves in in our hearts, right? Think once we know those, when we have like a good grasp of the things that we're kind of constantly leaning on and causing like conflict and tension inside of our heart, then something that I'm a big believer in is then counteracting that, right, with the truth. And maybe that looks like creating your own statements that you can say instead. It could look like breath prayers, right? Like practicing breathing in truth that might be rooted in scripture, meditating on these things that you really want to fill your mind with. I think that's really important. And so when we do that work just on a daily basis, that then helps us in those moments of crisis to actually be prepared and ready to have these conversations with ourselves. The other thing I'm really passionate about is just this idea of self-compassion. And that's something a lot of us really lack, right? Because really what happens is once we start to go down this really horrible cycle of like, I feel rejected and now I'm going to reject other people, what happens is we feel a lot of shame and we begin to condemn ourselves. And the voice in our head is just like, you're a terrible person. Like, you're never going to get better. You're never going to have these relationships. And shame actually is a detriment and an obstacle to ever being able to find healing, right? And so I think a lot of us grow up thinking, well, if I'm just harsh with myself, it's going to motivate me, right? Like, we think
Yeah.
it's a
I'll be
motivator.
tough. I'll be strong.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe there's a place for that. Sometimes we need a coach, but coaching is different than condemning. And
Mm.
so when I think about compassion and how Christ offered that to us, like that is the whole purpose of Jesus, coming to earth was to meet us in our mess and offer us compassion, mercy, and grace. He embodied it, right?
Yeah.
With his life, with his death, and then also coming back, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the problem is, as believers, while we believe that Christ is this embodiment of compassion, we actually don't know how to offer it to ourselves. And
Mm.
so we miss out living in what Christ has already given us. And I think if we could just begin to change the voice in our head to be one of loving kindness, of compassion, that in itself can completely regulate our bodies. I mean, this is where science is so cool, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we might feel this like sense of fight or flight, right? Like we're just feeling anxious and worried. But when we actually practice compassion, that regulates all of that. That
Mm.
slows our heart, it soothes our mind, and then we can think more clearly and change the way that we're responding to different situations.
Yeah, and I love that you talk about Jesus offering compassion, and he also offers us forgiveness. What
Yeah.
kind of role does forgiveness, if at any, play in our relationship with ourselves, maybe others, and
Yeah.
the rejection that we may experience?
Yeah, for me, that's been huge. Recently, probably like 3 years ago, went through some pretty hard friendship breakups. And
Mm.
in the midst of that, I realized that I was really hung up on like what I thought I had done and where I felt guilty. And a lot of it was just thinking, I'm just not someone people can be friends with. And so being able to just forgive myself, to offer that to myself and say, you did the best you could with the information you had, with the story you have. You're not going to move forward if you continue to just guilt yourself and give yourself a hard time for the ways that you operated. Is there a place to grow? Yes, but you can forgive yourself in this. So that's huge, the self forgiveness. But I think also when we're transformed by God's loyal love, by his faithfulness, that actually empowers us to forgive other people. And I like to, in the book, I actually don't use the word forgiveness a lot, but I
Mm.
do use the word generosity because I think those are one and the same. I believe that generosity is the active sign of forgiveness or the work of forgiveness that we are trying to give to other people. And so for me, I'm constantly thinking, okay, what does it look like to extend myself or lean in towards the people who have rejected me? How can I love the people who have betrayed me? How can I care about the people who have abandoned me? And I think that can look like a lot of different things, right? It
Yeah.
first does happen in the heart. It might be as simple as saying a prayer for the person who you might count your enemy, right? It might be writing a letter to someone and releasing them from the things that you have kind of held them guilty for so many years, right? Like it might look like saying hello to them when you pass them in the hallway and not expecting anything back from them. And so
Mm.
we get to have some discernment of like what that looks like,
Yeah.
but it's this constant work, right? Forgiveness is a process. It's not just a one and done, I think. It's a constant like, how can I live in this? How can I live
Mm.
in forgiveness and
Mm.
act from that place and be generous to the people who have hurt me?
Yeah, I love that so much because it's just like obedience, right? It's not like a one and done thing. It's something that we constantly have to live out and work out, just like our faith. And one
Yeah.
thing that I love that you said it's like you said, it's like, saying hello and not expecting anything in return. That is like the second half of that is really difficult, because we're like, I'll forgive, I'll be the bigger person, and I better get the outcome that I want to have. But when that doesn't happen, sometimes we can kind of revert back to, oh, well, I'll show them, and then we revert back to a heart that the Lord doesn't have for us. And so I think it's so amazing the way that you walk us through and give us those examples, because a lot of times we just look at forgiveness saying, okay, Lord, I choose to forgive this person. And then that's it. And we don't know what that looks like and how we even act that out, And so that's so incredibly powerful. As we closed, what is one thing that you would love to leave with readers today about loyal in his love?
Yeah. It really does come back to the thing that anchored me. And that is, a lot of times after we've been rejected or betrayed or abandoned, we really strive to find healing through other people. And that is good and well. Like we need community. But I think the thing that transforms us most is when we find healing through God and with our relationship with God. And we don't really prioritize that. And so my exhortation to those listening would be, maybe it's time to turn your eyes towards him and ask him what he thinks of you, and also to pray for him to open your eyes to his goodness and mercy in your life, the way that he consistently shows up for you, versus trying to look at how other people are not showing up for you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Tabitha. I'm listening, like I'm a reader, of this book, like, and I'm absorbing everything that you're saying, because it's like, it doesn't matter where we're at in life. These are all things that we can apply as tools to our life. So you guys make sure that you go out and you get loyal in his love. And you can also connect with Tabitha at her website, tabithapanariso.substack.com. Thank you so much for listening with us today on Life Today Live. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
It is always possible to do the will of God. He has given us the will to choose to come, to choose to bend our necks,